Hello, my name is Bishop Sharma Lewis, the resident bishop of the Richmond Episcopal area of the United Methodist Church. I have the pleasure today to have a conversation with Dr. David B. Agus. First, I would like to introduce you all to Dr. Agus. Dr. David B. Agus, is a professor of medicine and engineering at the University of Southern California, Keck School of Medicine, and Viterbi School of Engineering, and the founding director of USC's Lawrence J. Ellison Institute for Transformative Medicine. As a contributor to CBS News, he comments on important health topics regularly on television. Dr. Agus specializes in treating patients with advanced cancer. His clinical responsibilities include the development of clinical trials for new drugs and treatments for cancer, supported by the National Cancer Institute and other private foundations. He serves in leadership roles at the World Economic Forum, among other prestigious organizations. After earning his Bachelor's of Arts in Molecular Biology from Princeton University, and medical degree from the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine, he completed his medical residency training in Johns Hopkins University, a research fellow at the National Institute of Health, and an oncology fellowship at the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. He is also a 2017 recipient of the Ellis Island Medal of Honor. Dr. Agus, I want to share with you that I was first introduced to you by the Virginia Annual Conference Chancellor, Mr. Steve Brown, when he shared with me your frequent text messages that I receive on my phone. And I want to say to you, I thank you very much because I listen to you, and your text messages about COVID-19 has helped me greatly as I lead this annual conference. And so first of all, I just want to welcome you officially to the Virginia Annual Conference. Just to let you know that this conference is comprised of 1,610 clergy, 1,140 churches, as well as 330,000 non-clergy. And on next week, we will broadcast this interview. And I hope and pray that you will give us some great information today. So I have several questions for you. And the first question that I would like to start with is, can you just share with us, why should people be vaccinated? That is the big question right now. And why should we be vaccinated? As well as we know here in Virginia, we've just been told 3 weeks ago that Virginia, for the entirety of the vaccine, we're state number 49, of course, out of 50. So we have people who are eagerly wanting to be vaccinated. And of course, we are already doing the 1A, 1B vaccination. But in general, can you just share with people, why should people be vaccinated?
Well, thank you, Bishop. First of all, for having me here. It truly is a privilege to talk to you and all of your members. Vaccines have been around for literally 200 years, and they have obviously saved more lives than any other intervention medicine has made. This dastardly virus has the ability of spreading when people are asymptomatic. That's what's made it crazy difficult to take care of. And so if somebody gets it and they're asymptomatic, a young person, for example, they have about a 20% chance of having inflammation in the heart. 80% of inflammation in the lung, and that could cause problems the rest of their life. So we know it's a fact, this virus kills people and can cause major issues in the people it doesn't kill. Then you look at these vaccines. There are 4 leading vaccines that were developed over the last year, and they weren't rushed. They were built on a foundation of several decades of science. And obviously, you're a biologist. So this goes back a long way.
Yes.
And what we were able to show now, 31 million people around the world have been vaccinated, and there has yet to be one serious side effect to the vaccines that have lasted more than a day or so. And at the same time, these vaccines today block 100% almost hospitalization, and death from the virus. So those are pretty remarkable numbers where the vaccine themselves are safe and they work, yet the virus we know has enormous ramifications, both to individual health and obviously to our economy. We're really pushing for most people in the United States, 80, 90% to be vaccinated. And the real reason for that is that not everybody's going to be able to respond to a vaccine. People getting cancer therapy, they have immune problems, they're babies, they're pregnant women, they may not respond well to the vaccine. And if we're all vaccinated, this will stop the virus cold in its track, and those people can breathe easier. We have to think as a community, not as individuals. And that's a hard message to get out there, but we are all together in this fighting the virus.
Yes, that's correct. Let me ask you, there's always this question, is the supply of vaccines, why is the supply of vaccines so low right now?
It's a great question. And so, we were able to accelerate the development of the vaccine. The clinical trials were exactly the same as clinical trials for every other vaccine. But the real difficulty has been the manufacturing. Normally, you have 2-3 years to ramp up the manufacturing so that you know exactly the yield for every batch you make. A batch takes many weeks. Now, because we're new at the manufacturing, some batches are yielding almost no doses. Others are doing very well. And we haven't yet gotten to best practices. So I think what you're seeing now is week by week, manufacturing is getting better. It's getting more predictable and it's getting more efficient. I and many others are saying, get that first vaccine to as many arms as possible, because I know there are going to be second vaccines being made. I can look at the manufacturing and know they're getting better at it. And it's okay if that second vaccine is delayed a week or two. That doesn't cause any harm at all, but we need to get vaccines into arms. But manufacturing is the big issue. What we're seeing now is the government, and this new administration has been fantastic about taking a proactive role, is they are going to the companies that aren't making the vaccine and saying, hey, listen, the vaccine that you're making for shingles and other things, I want to take over your manufacturers and make a different company's vaccine. And the pharmaceutical companies are saying, okay. And so I love that proactiveness where you're seeing companies like Merck and Novartis who don't have a candidate in the race or not making a vaccine, but they're emptying their bioreactors, which is where you make them, and enabling other companies to use them. We're all in this together.
And yes, we are in this together. And you've already mentioned President Biden administration. Are you advising the Biden administration on the COVID-19 issues?
How could I not? When President Obama announced a war on cancer and put Vice President Biden at the time ahead of it, I ended up joining the board of the Biden Cancer Initiative. And I have worked with him from the beginning on that. So I have a deep love for the current president and an admiration for what he can get done and for his passion for doing things. No politician is perfect, as I'm sure you and everyone in the audience knows. But this president has a passion to doing things right. And that part I respect and I love. And so, yes, whether they like it or not, they hear from me almost daily about what I think they can be doing better and what I like that they're doing. And by the way, I had to work with the last administration too. My job as a scientist and as a doctor and someone who's trying to push an agenda of progress to benefit people, I have to work with whoever the president is. It is so much easier to work with this administration because we're talking real science. We're talking real data. And, at the end of every call, I go, oh, that was just so much easier than it was several months ago.
All right. I was getting ready to ask you, did you have an opportunity to advise the Trump administration?
You certainly had an opportunity to work with them, and there were many fine people in the administration, but it was a very different kind of administration.
Okay.
Now I see the global view. They get it. And it really is beautiful to talk with them about science and progress. And they are being so aggressive getting things done. I think it's fantastic.
Well, yes, especially aggressive when he says in his first 100 days, he wants 100 million people vaccinated. So that is very aggressive. Now, when you were sharing about the vaccines, are there new vaccines that will be coming out other than the 2 that we know of now?
Yes. And so in several weeks, in about 3 weeks, you'll see the Johnson & Johnson vaccine receive emergency use authorization from the FDA. This one's a little bit different because it's a one and done vaccine. It's not 2 shots, 3 and 4 weeks apart. It's 1 shot only. And so that will come out. And then several weeks after that, you'll see the AstraZeneca or Oxford University vaccine, which is a 2-part shot again, both of which are excellent vaccines. And so we are going to have 4 things in our armamentarium to fight this. And obviously they will dramatically increase supply also. And so people, and listen, it's horrible right now, right? You need to get your children, your grandchildren, everyone you know to just keep going online to try to find a slot. And
That's correct.
We've made it way too difficult and too complex. As supply enlarges with these 2 other vaccines, I think it's going to get a lot easier.
Oh, that's great. Now, for the layman, can you explain what does the vaccine do for us?
Listen, this is elegant science. So, don't laugh. This is really, I'm a geek. I get excited by it.
Look, I'd have to say this. I was a scientist before being a bishop, so I get excited about stuff like this. That's why I was excited about having this opportunity to interview you. But can you?
First of all, you weren't a scientist. You are a scientist. You don't stop being a scientist.
Now, you know what? I'm going to tell you something. That is true, because I will tell you the way in which sometimes I approach issues. I will tell you, I study. And actually the way in which we here in the Virginia Conference has approached this issue. I created an in-person worship work group where I have 2 doctors and I have clergy and laity on the work group, and they meet every day. We have written 2 handbooks. I also have a mission and ministry group. And I'll have to send all that to you so you can see a little bit of what I do. But can you explain to us this afternoon what the vaccine does for us?
Okay, so the human immune response is amazing. It basically has cells that are floating around our body looking for something that doesn't belong, and then it makes an immune response to it and gets rid of it. The problem is this virus has figured out a way to turn on our immune system in certain people so they get real sick from this virus and can die. So what a vaccine is, it's a tiny piece of the virus, what we call the spike protein. This is how the virus gets inside our cells. It binds to something called the ACE2 receptor, and it gets inside our cells. So just spike protein is put into this vaccine, and it's administered. The body then shows this spike protein to the immune cells, then make an immune response to it. And then if the real virus comes, that immune response is able to block it from getting into human cells. When you get the virus as an individual, you make a good immune response. The problem is that 90+% of it doesn't target the spike protein, it targets other parts of the virus. It can actually hide the virus from the immune system. The beauty here is that 100% of the immune system is targeting the spike protein to block the virus from getting in. And that's why vaccines are so powerful. And that's why vaccines work. They come from the 1800s, right? This guy named James Lind was watching women milk cows. And at the time, 11% of the world was dying of smallpox. And any somebody with smallpox would die also. And he noticed that the women would get pox on their arm when they milked the cows, and yet they wouldn't die. So he goes to the King of England and goes, I want to stick a needle in and draw the pus out of their arm and inject it into other people. And the king said, "You're crazy." He goes, "I'll inject myself." And he kicked him out. That night, the king had a dream of the King Solomon story, where 2 women go to King Solomon and said, "This is my baby." And
That's
King
right.
Solomon had the amazing, way of thinking. And it said, I'm going to rip the baby in half and give each of you half. And the real mother said, "No, you take the baby." And so he knew who the real mother was. So that morning, he called back this guy and said, Edward Jenner, I want you to inject your one son who's 5 years old. And if you inject your son, I know you really believe. And he did. And numbers 2 through 11 who got the vaccine were the royal family. So the king was number 2 in line for the first vaccine. To get normative behavior change, you need leadership. And that's why you and everyone in the audience today are leaders. And we really need you to stand up for talking about the science of the vaccine. Vaccines got politicized during this last administration, which is horrible. Your views on vaccines became what party you were part of or your politics. That doesn't make sense. This vaccine is for the benefit of humankind, period.
Another question for you. How long will this vaccine be good for?
So that's the key one. And so if the virus stayed stable, this vaccine would probably work several years. But the problem is the virus is zigging and zagging. So if you think about it this way, when I give you a vaccine, you're making an immune response at 10 different points on that spike protein. With the United Kingdom variant and the South African variant, we've removed 6 of those points. So you're still making an immune response that works, blocks you from getting hospitalized or from dying from the virus, but it's not as powerful. So we will need a booster for this vaccine with these new variants. We always expected the virus to zig and zag, and the good is science will zig and zag with it. You know, over 1 million years, the human genome changed 1% through evolution. This virus can change 1% in a day. So we know it's going to zig and zag. And so in the fall, we probably will get a booster with the new variants, and maybe a year later, another booster. So when we get our flu shot every year, we'll also get a new spike protein as the virus changes, and it'll be under control. Science will be on offense. We'll be in charge of the virus, not reacting like we are now. We're going to preemptively strike with these new variants.
Okay. And can you talk to us and explain to us about the variants? Because now we're hearing that in the news. Again, I will tell you, some of the folks here in our churches are concerned because I get that from our clergy. What about these variances? What does that mean for us? You know, and people are even wondering, you know, if I have the COVID-19, will I get this other variants? And specifically when you're watching the news and you're hearing that now, when they were first saying that the South African variants was not here, now I think they said it is now here. Can you talk with us a little bit about explaining what is the variants, and also can you calm down some of our fears about it?
Certainly. So the variants are this virus changing, and you know the virus changes all the time, and normally the changes don't mean anything. But when the change gives the virus an advantage over other viruses, it becomes the dominant strain. So for example, in England, this UK variant was 1%. And then literally 40 days later, it was 90% of the cases because it was more infectious. It takes about 1,000 particles with the first virus for me to spread it to you. Every time I speak, droplets come out, and you need a very high viral load in order to get sick from the virus. With this new one, because it binds so well to that spike protein, you need significantly less. So if before it took 10 minutes of me speaking to you 3 feet apart, now it may take 4 or 5 minutes. So it is more infectious. It doesn't make you any sicker. There's really no data on that, but it is more infectious. And because it changed some, our immune response was to the first strain. It's not as good to the second one. So if you got the first one and you got the COVID-19, you were sick, and you were exposed to one of these new variants, you certainly can get sick again. And that's what we're. The beauty of the vaccines is brings up such a high antibody and T cell response, it still protects you. And so they are protecting hospitalization and death from these new strains. So we still have good protection from them with these new vaccines. That's why it's critical to get these vaccines now. And the bottom line is, the more virus there is in the country, that is, the slower we are to vaccinate, the more the virus has a chance to change, even a new variant. So we have to get aggressive here to fight them. So there's no cause for panic or alarm. There's just awareness now that we have to somewhat change our behavior. You know, the CDC now said about double masking. And so what they mean by that is that these are pretty good masks, right? They're and they work really well. But when I put them on, there may be a little bit of area here where it's open and here where it's open.
Yes.
Saying, if and you're in a high risk situation, so not when you're walking outside, but if you're in a busy supermarket, you want to put a cloth mask on top. So what that does is it actually holds down the ends. And so I think you should wear double mask when you go out to higher risk situations only. For the regular risk ones, one mask is fine and great. But the key thing is we have to wear these masks.
And Dr. Agus, I don't know if we can say that enough. Can you, I know you get this all the time, but can you very quickly just again share with people, why is it important for us to wear our masks, social distance, wash our hands? I know that is an old statement. You probably have said it. You probably have an elevator speech, but can you once again reiterate the importance of those three major things, as well as, of course, the circulation of the air? But why do we need masks? Why do we need to social distance? And why do we need to wash our hands?
You know, the hard part about this virus is that, you know, the first time the public saw we in the medical community basically learn as we went. You saw the sausage being made. So
Mhm.
that first month, we didn't know that there was asymptomatic spread. That is, with no symptoms, I could spread the virus to you. So we didn't tell people to wear masks that first month. And I think the public said, oh, they said not to wear them. They don't know what they're talking about. But we learned as we went. And what we know now is that it's spread almost predominantly by droplets. And a droplet is a small little droplet of water that when I speak or when I breathe leaves my mouth. Most of them hit the ground with gravity, but some of them go several feet and they carry virus. And if I wear a mask, the amount of droplets that will get through here is almost zero. So there is literally little chance of me spreading a virus if I wear a fitting mask. And I think that's what's really critical, is that wearing a mask protects you, not just me. And then if you wear a mask, also you get some protection yourself, because some of those droplets will get stuck on the outside. And again, you need a certain number of virus to get sick. Your immune system can handle a small number of particles. It just can't handle a large number of particles. So wearing the mask has some protection for you, but a lot of protection for everyone around you. We all have to talk about other people. And so this has really taught us we are one community. Everybody in every congregation here, it matters what the people next to you do in addition to what you do. And that's difficult, right? We're the only country I know of with a Bill of Rights. Everybody said, it's my right not to wear a mask. And I just give them a look and go, no, it is not your right to potentially harm somebody else.
Exactly.
The way we got people to stop smoking in the United States is we say, hey, listen, you can do what you want to yourself, but secondhand smoke kills other people. And that was the argument that had the biggest drop in smoking and tobacco use in the United States. When you do something that can harm somebody else, you don't have a right to do it. You could do it, in your closet. You could sit there without a mask. You can smoke in your house, but you can't smoke in a restaurant.
Right.
And you can't go to a public place not wearing a mask. In my mind, it makes no sense for you to be able to harm somebody else.
That is so true. Dr. Agus, I get this as the bishop, and I get this a lot because, of course, people want to be back in their churches. What is back to normal for us?
So the word
ask you.
Whenever I hear the word bishop, I keep thinking of the Queen's Gambit and playing chess. It's very exciting. You're a chess piece too. Back to normal. That's the key thing, right? Is that we're going to hopefully be able to vaccinate the majority of the country by June and July. And so then we're going to see dramatic falls in the number of cases. Israel is ahead of us, right? Israel has already vaccinated 60% of their country, and they're going decade by decade. So all the older people are vaccinated. There are almost no hospitalizations and no deaths in older people now in Israel. Wow. And that's amazing. We're going to see the same thing here. And the new normal will be, if you have a cold or don't feel ill, you either stay home or you wear a mask. So in old days, you were tough if you went out with a cold and went to work. I never miss work. I'm tough. Well, if you are going to go out and you have to go out, you're going to wear a mask and stop the spread of anything to somebody else. And we're all going to be healthier from that. We're going to think differently about how we design our churches, our buildings, and others. We're going to have good ventilation and good airflow. We're going to think how we do our seating and others. And we're going to be able to go back to a new normal, hopefully in the fall, where we can be in church, we can be in school, we can be at work. But at the same time, some people are still going to work from home. Their jobs are going to say, hey, listen, you're doing really well at home. There's no need for you to be here. And if I can get the number of people working in this small area from 50 to 25, everybody is safer. We're going to do that. And so we're going to see these new attitudes to workplaces. We're going to see new attitudes. Maybe some churches are going to have 2 services because people were packed in before and they just want to give people a little bit more breathing room. And so they'll have 2 services, an early one and one for people like me that are around a little bit later in the day. And I think that's going to be important going forward, is we all have to think about this and look at it with a new lens. Everything we did, let's look back and say, can we make a little bit better improvement there? Let's take some positive from this horrible year and this virus and learn from it and maybe change some of our behaviors.
Let me ask you a question. I saw an article and it was also brought to my attention. I think it was 2 days ago. Dr. Fauci had said that he felt that we would have herd immunity. Is it by May or so, or what is the new month on that?
I really think we should be able to have it by June or July.
By June or July.
And I hope I hope it happens sooner.
Okay.
It really depends on two things: vaccine supply, which is going to ramp up. Toward the end of next month, anybody who wants a vaccine is going to start to be able to get it. We're going to have a lot
Okay.
more supply, and I think everyone's shoulders will come down some. But then we're going to have to get over vaccine hesitancy. And I think that's what's critical, is that a lot of people, for a lot of reasons, and some of those reasons are very good reasons. Some of them are historical reasons. Some of them are reasons of stories they've heard that they believe are true, but aren't true. We have to start to get the word out through education. If I tell someone what to do, they get pissed off at me. If I explain to them the data, almost everybody does the right thing. Some Silicon Valley company had me come in once and said, help us with our food. And I had the burgers subsidize the salad, twice as much of a burger, half for a salad. People got pissed off. Well, a week later, I put next to each food, because there's no perfect food, there's no horrible food, the good and the bad, behavior changed overnight.
Wow.
We live in an information age, and people are smart. If we tell them the data, they're going to do the right thing. If we tell them what to do, like parents screaming at a child, their shoulders just go up. And I don't want that. And so we all have to learn. And so that's why I'm so excited to speak to you and everyone here, because the key is to really understand the information. You're going to see on the internet, well, all these people died of the vaccine. That just isn't true. There's not one person in the world with over 30 million people that has died of the vaccine. Well, this doctor in Florida died because he had a low platelet count. That is just not true. That is that story. We can go case by case. And so we really have to go to the real data. There's no question it's safe. What about long-term safety? That's a very good argument. We don't know long-term safety. Every vaccine in history that I'm aware of, all of the side effects are seen in the first 4 to 6 weeks. And certainly we haven't seen it with these. Does that mean in year 10 we won't see something happen? No, but it is remarkably unlikely, whereas it's almost certainty that you can get illness and sometimes long-lasting effects from the virus.
I want to ask you another question, because I've learned as a scientist, as well as a bishop, you never assume that people understand and know words. I just asked you the question about when will we have herd immunity. Can you explain that for us?
Yeah, so I'm glad you said that. And I apologize for not explaining herd immunity before. So, herd immunity means that enough people are vaccinated in the country so the virus doesn't spread. There are about 7% of the United States that can't respond to a vaccine. And so if there's still virus around, let's say 50% of people are vaccinated, those people are safe. The other people, a small percentage will be hospitalized and a small percentage will die. But if you can't make an immune response to a vaccine, you have to be responsible for everybody around you to be vaccinated for you to be safe.
That's right.
A lot of children have immune issues and can't go to school if not enough people are vaccinated. And I think that's what's critical. This is not a vaccine that we call it sterilizes the virus, gets rid of the virus. Most vaccines, measles is a great example, mumps. So almost every child in the United States is vaccinated for mumps. It's a case where, an Orthodox Jewish community got together and there was a case of the mumps. And it actually spread to 3,000 people. And they didn't get very ill because they all were vaccinated, but it still spread. Well, the few people within that couldn't get vaccinated for immunologic reasons or they cancer therapy, those people almost died. In fact, one of them did. And so we have to think about others. And that's what herd immunity is. It's when enough people are vaccinated, the virus has nowhere to go and it just goes away. And then we're all protected. And that's what we're praying or hoping for. Enough people are vaccinated so that we can say goodbye to this virus. And the people who don't have the ability of making a strong enough immune response are protected.
I have a few more questions, and then I'm going to switch to some more questions, I would say, that folks that's with worship would want to know about worship. But a few more questions. And you made a statement about there are some people, and some, of course, minority people, and because of some things that have happened in the past with minority populations, specifically, I'm speaking of the Tuskegee syphilis report. How can we help, or how can I, as an African American woman, help people of color not to be afraid to go and be vaccinated?
That's critical. I mean, there are certain cultures. Listen, I'm Jewish, and my religion was experimented on during Nazi Germany over and over again. Tuskegee was even more egregious because you weren't told you were being experimented on. It's a horrible injustice. We can't let previous experiences guide things now that can actually save lives.
That's right.
So the clinical trials that were done purposely to be diverse and represent the fabric of what the United States is. The clinical trials of these vaccines purposefully had people of every race, every weight, every medical condition to really reflect who our United States is. And what
Yes.
we were able to see from that is that it was very safe in people of every different race, every different age, and every different weight, as well as all the medical conditions. And so we need to build fabric of trust back to medical science and to these clinical trials. The people in the clinical trials who represented every race were heroes. I mean, they were literally heroes. They stepped up and said, I want to be part of the solution, not the problem.
Mhm.
And there were several 100,000 people in the United States. I helped develop the software that registered people. And literally, on putting it out there, people just said, I want to be part of it. And it was beautiful. I had tears in my eyes watching people sign up,
Amen.
sign up. And many of them were, minority populations that I want to be a leader from people of my race, people of my religion. I want to show them. And, we are standing on their shoulders. We are thanking them for what they did in record time. The accrual to these clinical trials for these vaccines was like none other we've ever seen in this country. They were being called to war and they answered the call. And that
Right.
call to duty enables all of us to breathe easier, to know it's safe and to know they're effective. And so I understand the past injustices. We have to talk about them. We have to bring it
Yes.
out in the open. And that's the positive here, is that these discussions now are good. These discussions now, we have a runway now as we get more and more supply. And we have to take advantage of this runway. Hopefully everybody in the audience will take advantage of this runway and talk to people and get over these barriers so we can all be vaccinated. Let's take advantage of the fact that, there's limited supply now and educate, educate, educate. So when there's major supply, hopefully the end of next month, we're ready.
That's good. I've heard this question being asked several times. Can a pregnant woman take the vaccine?
So it's interesting. In the clinical trials, it's customary not to include pregnant women because we don't want to experiment when there's a potential, developing child at stake. So as soon as the clinical trials were done, we said, oh, what about pregnant women? We're vaccinating frontline workers.
Yes.
65% of frontline workers are women, and many of them either were pregnant or didn't know they were pregnant and turned out to be pregnant. This vaccine, we were actually part of the team that puts together something called vSafe. Every person who gets the vaccine is given a card with a QR code. You put your phone on it, and you have the ability every day of telling how you feel and what happened to you.
Mm.
So it's the first vaccine, first drug in our history where we collect data after it's been approved. Classically, which makes no sense. The day something is approved by the FDA, we stop collecting data. So on this one, we now have data on, close to 30 plus million events. We have tens of thousands of women who were pregnant who submitted their data, and now we know it's safe.
Mm.
And, so we didn't day one, but now we do. And it really is reflective of technology, enable us to collect data from many of these women who said, it is my obligation to stay as a frontline healthcare worker. So I'm going to get the vaccine and I'm going to submit my data to benefit other women. So again, we're standing on their shoulders and thanking them because they showed us it was safe for women who are pregnant to be vaccinated. And I think, all of us owe a debt of gratitude to those women, as to everybody in the clinical trials who were able to make it women down the road breathe easier to get this vaccine. And the immunity is transferred to the child. So get vaccinated when you're pregnant. When that baby is born, the first year, your baby doesn't make a good immune response. Gets a lot of the immunity from you. And if you're vaccinated, you will transfer it to that child and enable them to live a healthier life also.
Let me ask you another question. What about people that carry an EpiPen? Do they wait on the vaccination or?
So what you're referring to is that these RNA vaccines, in
Yes.
order for them to get inside the cells, they have something called an excipient, which is a little fat layer around them. And there's a very, very small percentage of people that make an immune response to it, and they have an allergic response. And, these are people classically that carry EpiPens for other allergies. And so
Right.
everybody who gets the vaccine for these first two RNA vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna, we have to follow them for 15 or 30 minutes afterwards to make sure there's no reaction. The next vaccine, Johnson & Johnson, that should be on the market in the next few weeks, has no excipient, so there is no allergic reaction. So either if you get called now, I would take the vaccine, and the allergic reactions are imminently treatable. We're good at it. We're all prepared to look for it. Or you can wait for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine in a few weeks where this is not going to be an issue. But there have been very few of these reactions, but they do happen. Every single one of them has been treated, and there's been no long-term complications from any of them. But the Johnson & Johnson and the AstraZeneca don't have this issue.
Okay. I'm going to now switch and start talking more related to church and worship. Here in the Commonwealth, churches or mosques or synagogues, of course, it is up to the faith leaders to make the determination about opening their doors for worship. But can we now worship in person with wearing a face covering and social distancing? What would you say to faith leaders? Because I still have some churches here that are a little afraid still to worship. What would you advise us as faith leaders to share with our members?
So in 1918, with the Spanish flu, which by the way started in Kansas and not Spain, for almost 3 years, we shut down houses of worship in the United States. Now we're smarter. We have, better understanding of what viruses are, how they're spread, and what they do. So can you have a church service that is safe? No question about it. Can you have a church service that becomes a super spreader event? No question about it. So one needs to use science and one needs to use best practices to do it right. And doing it right always isn't the most comfortable and easy. And sometimes, there's a reticence, I don't want to tell people to do this or to do that. But unfortunately, we all have to step up and do things that are sometimes uncomfortable. And what that means is asking people to wear masks, asking that they don't sing very loudly, asking that we social distance and put people in their pods when they sit down, working on the ventilation and how we design the church, maybe having several services so we can social distance. Not as convenient, not as easy, but it certainly is a lot safer. We're seeing that in schools, right? Schools we're asking to be open because if you look, because most schools do it right. When a school does it right, the rate of infection in the school is lower than that of the surrounding community. And I guarantee you that same will be true in places of worship. If you do it right, the risk is probably less in the community where you don't have someone looking out and telling people what to do, and they're doing and probably taking a little bit of leniences here and there. But in the church, if you really do it right, it can be safe. And so, many of you have figured out ways to do it. And I implore all of you, tell each other what worked and what didn't work.
Right.
You're all one team. And when you share best practices, you elevate all of you doing the right thing better.
Yeah, right. When will it be safe for our local pastors to take off their face coverings when they're preaching?
I think that by the fall, so, by August, September, we're going to be at that stage. It's not going to be where, some of, the churches, people are packed to the gills and the vespers. And, I don't think we're going to be there then, but I do think we're going to be at a new level where we enable that to happen. But it really does require vaccines. You've seen some of the largest concert providers in the country. Live Nation said, we're going to have concerts, probably the end of the year, but everybody who comes is going to have to show that they had a vaccine in order to attend. And so you have a right in our country not to be vaccinated, but there are certain privileges that we're going to give to people that we know can't harm others. And that should be, in my mind, I know it's controversial to say it, but it should be going to church. It should be going to synagogue. It should be going to a concert. It should be going to a crowded restaurant. We're going to really make sure that we do it safe and we do it right, because we all need places of worship. We all need to get together as a community.
Most definitely.
It's what builds, our bodies, our brains were made for that. And we've had a rough year because of it. A lot of people are having a lot of issues. We're not used to Zooming. The body loves 3 dimensions, right?
Right.
Looking at you, and my brain is working twice as hard because I'm seeing you in, this, a unidimensional space. And that has to change. And that is going to change with getting together, but we have to do it right. And I think having the guts to be able to explain vaccines and say, I want you to be in church with everybody around you, and you need a vaccine to do that. That's a gutsy call, but I think it's the call.
If pastors are 30 feet away from people indoors at a service, do you feel that they can take off their mask to preach? I get that question a lot.
This is me saying it, not the CDC or the government. I think if you're in a church that has good ventilation, that's okay. I think if you're in a church that has, 7-foot ceilings and very poor ventilation, it's probably not a smart thing to do.
Okay.
So I have to give a little bit of a qualitative answer.
Okay.
More modern churches all have great ventilation. Some of the older churches are remarkable because the ceilings are, to the, very high. And so
Right.
many of the ones in the middle have some issues. And so in a qualitative way, I'd say if you do it right, yes.
Okay. This is another question that we get, and my in-person worship work group gets this. I think every week somebody asks this question. We have read that we should not be singing indoors right now. When do you think we can start singing with mask indoors?
Again, as soon as we vaccinate the people who are really vulnerable, you're not going to do a church service and say, I don't want you to come if you have blood pressure issues, if you have diabetes, if you're over the age of 60. And so we have to take care of everybody. And so when we vaccinated people who are all vulnerable and we're wearing a mask, then I think some of those recommendations can change. We've all seen it, right? I go to the ICU every day, see patients, and literally it's still filled. And I feel horrible for every single one of them because, they got the virus, weeks before they would have been vaccinated and they would have been safe. And it's such a hard thing to watch and to see and just see their families suffering, and they're in hospitals alone. I mean, at the hospital, one of the hardest things is if you get sick and are hospitalized, your family can't visit. You're
That's
there
right.
at the scariest time of your life, trying to communicate by FaceTime or by your phone. And that's not right. So right now we're still in the protective mode. My hope is, by the beginning of the summer, we're out of that protective mode and we can start to do some of that singing that we all long for, except if you hear my voice, you won't long for me doing it, but for everybody else.
And this is another question I get. When can we stop wearing masks, sit close to each other in a pew, and sing indoors? I get that question every week.
I think it's going to be September, and I think it's going to be a little, again, it's going to be a qualitative way initially. Again, I'm going to really push for the good ventilation. I mean, right now, when the churches are not full occupancy, you want to start to look and say, how can I make it safer for my church?
Right.
Put the pews a little bit further apart so that I can have some safety, yet people feel still they're part of a community. But I do think, that by the fall, we're going to have a new normal where we can start to do that. But again, you're going to tell everyone in your audience, if you feel ill at all, please stay home.
Stay home.
If somebody has a cold, please ask them to leave. This isn't like the old days where you were tough if you went out with that cold. We really are saying is that, if you stay home for that week, you're going to make it better and safer for everyone.
So really, I guess what we know from the Word of God, we are our brothers and our sisters' keeper.
No question about it. And this virus showed us that more than ever. And it really reinforced that. We're one community. I mean, humans are remarkably resilient creatures. I'm amazed about what we can tolerate and do. And we're going to bounce back from this. We're going to bounce back from this stronger than ever. Science is going to enable this to happen. Our community, our faith leaders are going to be the reason we bounce back. But we have to do it in a safe, in a graded, and in a timed way.
Yeah, I think we cannot say that enough. I'm looking over my notes here, and I forgot to ask you one question that I also hear a lot about is people want to know side effects of any of these vaccines.
So there are two buckets, if you will, of side effects. The first is your immune response to the vaccine. So when I give you the vaccine, your body makes an immune response. You get a fever, you can get chills, you can get pain at the injection site, you could feel fatigue. That classically happens kind of 12 to 36 hours afterwards. I felt it some on my first and a little bit more on my second. Classically, the side effects are a little bit more in the second than the first. The wildest thing is the older you are, the fewer the side effects to the vaccines. It seems to go inversely to age. The second group of side effects are when your immune response hits something else, so that the spike protein resembled some other thing in the body, and we have seen 0 of these. So the first one are the real side effects that we worry about, is that your immune response, which is a good thing, it's what you're feeling, right? You're feeling that immune response. Those immune cells are going, you feel a little bit achy, you feel a little bit of fever.
Right.
And by the way, Tylenol works. I took it, and the reason I knew that fatigue was from the vaccine, I took Tylenol. Half hour later, I'm like, oh my gosh, the fatigue is gone. And it worked. So the side effects are tolerable. They're gone after a few days in almost everybody. None of them have been long lasting. The things that you're seeing on the internet about, well, the person's platelet counts went down, they had this issue, that issue. Most of those were made up or other things. When you vaccinate people, somebody's going to have a heart attack, right? But the heart attack, when they look, wasn't related to the vaccine. It may have been a week afterwards, but when they looked closely, it wasn't related. They had existing heart disease. So things will happen. But to date, the vaccines have not caused major issues in anybody around the globe.
Okay. Well, Dr. Agus, I want to say thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with me today. I have one final question. How can people follow you? I'm following you, but how can people follow you?
Well, the usual ways, which again, it's always embarrassing to say, like the Twitter and the Instagram. But I have a text service, and I have to look up the number, although I think you have the number.
I got the number. If you don't have it, I got it.
I send out a text, once or twice a week with a video of just telling what's going on. There's no marketing information, your information, there's no ads, there's nothing. It's just me talking. This is a service that enables me to do it because I'm trying to do it as a public service, is to educate. So it's 310-299-9322. If you text that number, you'll be subscribed and you'll get the text from me. And then you send a text back. If you have a question, I'll answer it. And I have a team that helps me because there's a large number now, but it really is a privilege to get information out there and to educate. Early on in my career, one of my mentors said, you could do good medicine and do good science, but if you can't talk to people and educate them, you've done a disservice to your field. And I believe in that. And so I appreciate you and everything you're doing. I appreciate your science background. And I appreciate your leadership, and everyone in the audience, their leadership. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And please, any further questions, text me on this, and we're happy to respond and help you educate others. If we're all in this together, we're going to get a good outcome.
Amen. I can say amen to that. I want to give that number again. Dr. Agus's number is 310-299-9322. 310-299-9322. I can say I am a follower of Dr. David B. Agus. I have texted him my number. He has texted back, and I have heard some of your videos, saw some of your videos, information that you text out. It has been quite beneficial. Again, I just want to say thank you very, very much. I feel a kindred spirit because yes, as you say, I am still a scientist. I am a scientist. Now I'm a bishop, but I am a scientist. And I enjoy, when I was in the science field, I enjoyed what I did then. And I definitely enjoy what I do now. I want to be sensitive to your time because I do know that you have another appointment. And I also want to just say thank you for your admin, I think, Miss Allie Lee, as well as Wendy Platt for setting this up for us, as well as my digital specialist, Hunter Brim. I want to just make sure I say thank you for all three of them. But Dr. Agus, I will be keeping you in my prayers for all the work that you have done with cancer, as well as now the work that you are doing with COVID. And if no one hasn't said this to you, haven't said this to you recently, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Bishop Lewis. I truly appreciate the privilege.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.